Hello, this is Stephen L. And yes, we are back with the final Green Hornet 66 episode review. And that means we are reviewing Invasion from Outer Space Part 2. This is the final episode of the classic Green Hornet series. Let's see how this episode is, and then afterwards I will talk about my general thoughts on the series. And do I think, that did it deserve to have been cancelled after only one season? So, with that out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, let's get straight into this review. Just to recap from Part 1, the Green Hornet and Kato are battling a very new adversary, Dr. Eric Mabuse, who is essentially a brilliant scientist, though incredibly deranged. Whilst he and his goons pretend to be aliens, they end up stealing an atomic warhead from the military. That's pretty much, they ended that on Part 1, they ended up taking it. But at the same time, they ended up kidnapping Miss Case, who was in their clutches, only for her to escape and rescued by the Green Hornet. But before they managed to get her, Casey reveals, essentially she had placed a bug, a tracking device on one of the henchmen. The Green Hornet then uses this to track down Mabuse and the rest of his crew. Mabuse has got the warhead and is making his escape. However, just as they are in the truck, which is essentially which serves as their mobile base of operations, one of Mabuse's devices goes off, pretty much indicating that there is a bug in their system. Mabuse is smart and deranged enough and finds out, that the henchman with the bug. However, he kind of views him as a liability, and as a result plans a trap to get the Green Hornet and Kato in his clutches, while also getting rid of the henchman who was foolish enough to have the tracking device placed on him. As the Green Hornet and Kato get into a nearby forest, they get out of the Black Beauty and search the nearby area, only to find what they thought was Mabuse and his men planning out their, planning out one of their plans. They try to ambush them, but finding out what they really saw was an actual mirror and a hidden microphone. They are then surrounded by Mabuse and the rest of his henchmen. It is here revealed to us that Mabuse actually knows of the Green Hornet, and surprisingly one of the few villains in the Green Hornet Rogues Gallery to know of the partner's actual name, Kato. Mabuse is one of those few villains who's both impressed of the Green Hornet's attributes, but at the same time is very much wants to get rid of him immediately, as he pretty much views him as a, a threat to his plan. So he comes up with an idea. He rigs the Hornet sting to the Black Beauty car, and plans to have the Green Hornet, Kato, and one of his men, the one that was bugged, put in the car. And with the police on the highway coming within the vicinity, will activate the vibrations from the road to the Stinger, which the Stinger has been set up to sense. Once that happens, the Stinger will blast at the car, especially the dynamite underneath, killing all three occupants. Therefore, the police will realize that the Green Hornet really masterminded the whole operation, as one of Mabuse's henchmen being there, and that would trigger that, Green Hornet was responsible. The henchman pleads for Mabuse to let him go, but he says no. As a result, all three occupants are placed in the Black Beauty, and Mabuse and his boys make their leave, with the Green Hornet, Kato, and the henchmen all locked in the car, and pretty much thinking that, maybe they are numbered. Green Hornet only sees one way. He plans to essentially, use the rockets to, get them out of this situation. How? By firing, I guess, at the detonator, and as a result managing to move the car away from the Stinger. The henchman, however, does not want to go along with this and thinks this is too risky, but the Green Hornet says there is no other choice. We have to go through with this. Yeah, I don't fully get this. I love the death trap setup, but I personally just don't get, how is this going to get him out? But logically it would make it worse. However, despite that, not in logic, it is a very suspenseful scene, as we do see the police car come, and we are constantly cut to the gauge near the Stinger, sensing the vibrator, especially with the Green Hornet has to slowly but quickly move to have the rockets be activated in order to get out. However, the henchman is too scared and quickly jumps out of the car and as a result, I think it gets caught by the stinger and explosions all at the same time, presumably killing him and getting the Green. And as a result, the Green Hornet and Kato managed to get out safely. They quickly managed to untie themselves and begin to drive away to quickly get Maboose. Whilst Maboose is in his, mobile truck, waiting to be picked up by their helicopter with their warhead, they find out that the helicopter is refusing to land, as Scanlan, in coordination with the police and the military, have cornered off or locked down all airfields. As a result, Maboose's plan is pretty much foiled, as he has to, get away with the warhead if he wishes to get away in order to blackmail them for ransom of the warhead. With this plan gone awry, and there's really no way of getting, what he wants, he decides plan B is simply blow up the city once they are out of range of the warhead. He dumps it nearby the side of the road, and they quickly get going. Once they're out of range, he'll blow it up. But his really top leader henchman is not fully on board with the plan. And he says it's only meant to be used as a threat. Obviously, he feels like this is something he has not signed up for. However, realizing that he's not getting through to Maboose, Maboose actually leaves him with the warhead. Plans to stay there and die with the rest, knowing that he can't outrun it, while he and the rest of his crew go away. I'm surprised the goons are realizing this is 2 henchmen he's willing to get rid of. Should we not take him out instead? But I guess because he has that female accomplice under his control, I think if they did, she would wipe them all out. So that at least is my logic of why they're probably loyal. That and probably out of fear, because he is absolutely mad, and I would dare say psychotic. Anyway, as they get further away, the Green Hornet manages to follow the road and possibly a tracker to get close to Maboose, only to end up finding the warhead and one of Maboose's men. Maboose basically spills the beans to the Green Hornet, and they realize what they have to do. They have to get to Maboose and get the remote out of his hands before he blows the whole place sky high. They take the henchmen with them, and they follow the high, and he leads them to the directions of where they're going. And here's the tension. They're trying to catch up to the car, with Maboose on the remote, slowly dialing up the gauge, and I could really feel the suspense here, because this is a whole new meaning of the ticking clock. And especially since the henchmen might say, henchmen say, he might blow up the whole place, even if he does know we're tracking him. He may actually take all of them with him in the explosion just to get revenge. So it's hinting he's willing to kill himself in the explosion just to get revenge. Anyway, the Black Beauty is slowly reaching up to Maboose's truck. The Green Hornet pops out of the Black Beauty and begins to climb onto the truck. He makes his way in and fights Maboose and his men and destroys most of the equipment. The Black Beauty then gets in front of the truck and one of the cars and pretty much forces them to park off the side of the road. And here we get the final Kato action scenes of the series. It is pretty well choreographed, and of course Bruce Lee is of course a master at this. Just as the Green Hornet is dealing with Maboose and his men inside the truck, Maboose orders Velma, the female henchwoman, to fire at the Green Hornet, only for him to quickly pick up a mirror, and the electricity bounces off the mirror and instead knocks her out by default. He takes out the remaining henchmen, and I think he takes out Maboose. I'm pretty sure it's only just he just, punched him, if I believe. But as they're doing that, they are wrestling for control of the remote. This is a really gripping scene. And again, as far as I know, this was, I think, one of the best Green Hornet fights of the series. And I think he knocks out Maboose. He might have slightly electrocuted him as he did kind of back into, all the electrical stuff. Just as he gets out of the truck, though, Kato rounds up the goons. They got the remote, and they quickly make a run for it, hearing the police. They let the one henchman who tracked them, who they, was within the Black Beauty, they let him out, and they drive off. The Green Hornet then deactivates the remote, essentially disarming the warhead and saving the day. It's revealed in the epilogue of Velma's power with the thing was actually that of her electric bolts, like how that worked, was she wore a belt, and these wires were put up and were activated as soon as she raised her arms. There is a nice little gag between between all four of them. They have a nice laugh, but Britt Reed realizes he has to quickly get on his date, and he quickly leaves. And that is the last scene in the Green Hornet series, and we end it there. Okay, Frank Scanlon as the DA is, compared to Gordon, more competent law enforcement official than he is. You can see how he takes command, in dire circumstances. For me, when it comes to the Green Hornet, he has very few allies, and he is his only contact in law enforcement. We get very little of, Bruce Lee's Kato, but then again, that's kind of expected to be honest. And of course, we get very little of Casey. She only really appears at the end of the episode. Once again, no Mike Axford. That's a real shame that he doesn't appear. He doesn't get a chance to have his bow with the rest of the cast. But honestly, that kind of makes sense, because I don't think how I would see him honestly fitting in this episode. Maybe you could work it in, but I don't think it would help the smooth transition. And of course, the Green Hornet, a very unique superhero, definitely. But, he is a superhero who pretends to be a criminal. In fact, he plays into it. He operates very differently compared to other vigilante superheroes. And, he is just a great character. And, of course, Van Williams played him absolutely phenomenally. And for me, just like Bruce Lee is Kato to me, Van Williams is a definitive Green Hornet to me. And I don't think he can get, any better than this great pairing, in my honest opinion. And the villains, of course, is Dr. Eric Mabuse, played by actor Larry D. Mann, and Velma, portrayed by Linda Gaya Scott. Hopefully I'm pronouncing these actor and actress name right. Now, first off, I absolutely love Mabuse. He is definitely a very different and unique villain in the Green Hornet series. Again, he's a mad scientist, brilliant and mad. He kind of reminds you of the old pulps. I absolutely find him an absolutely fantastic villain. Everything from his in the first part is great, but what I love here, as he's getting madder and madder, he's willing to actually off his henchmen, and he's getting more and more psychotic. Velma is a great addition as really his muscle. Now, I would love to see Dr. Mabuse come back, because honestly, he's great. You can easily make him come back, wanting revenge for the Green Hornet for ruining his master Caper, and also to prove his brilliance and make the Green... So I kind of like that. You can have a villain in his rogue scale who wants to prove he's smarter, but he could play it as more of either pulp star or traditional James Bond villain. Velma, I have no reason to see come back if these characters were to come back. Velma really should have just be a product of really this episode as a female henchwoman. And it's interesting because the Green Hornet really does surprisingly have very few female villains in this series. But I think she's definitely, in my opinion, the more memorable one, but also, I would say the more interesting one. She's, definitely makes her stamp as being a very memorable, in my opinion, very memorable villain to this series. She is just unique, and plus the clothing, it kind of reminds me of a gold, like her suit is clearly a golden suit version of Catwoman's from the Adam West show, but this is just a great, these are just great villains, and even though I'm not hugely fond of the alien theme that they went with, thank goodness for the second part they dropped that. In fact, it's rarely mentioned. They made really great antagonists for the Green Hornet's final bow. Invasion from Outer Space Part 2. So far, a really good episode. I would say it definitely feels like a really great episode, even though I do really wish like it could be more signifying this is the final episode. But then again, the Batman 66 show didn't have an episode that really screamed final, but just another fun-hearted adventure you could laugh on the way out. For this, it does end the season, but it also doesn't end the series for me. It makes me want to see this character more, and I guess maybe this is why the series has become a cult classic, because after you see this, people want to see more of the Green Hornet, both with, with the Green Hornet character, Kato the sidekick, especially the sidekick, and even the supporting characters. It has some, for me, I think this two-parter, now, I love it, and I especially love the second part because they don't mention the alien thing. It was clearly meant to be more of a product of, again, I think it was really meant to be used in the first episode part of it, of the two-parter. And another thing, they also gave an explanation, I just realized, to explain the saucer, the crash. Apparently it was just some rust materials and they put some chemicals over it to make it like fire thing. It's a pretty, I don't know how, if that would be very realistic, but it is an interesting way to explain it. Overall, Invasion from Outer Space Part 2 is a good, solid second part. It ends the two-parter, but it also, for me, I think doesn't really end the series well, as in, it doesn't feel like this is a final episode of a season, but it also, for me, doesn't end the series that well with giving, like, a final goodbye, like all final episodes do, to say goodbye to the series. But even that, it also works in making you want to see more of the Green Hornet character. As a result, you go to other media, so you can look at it in that way. Overall, this is a really, Part 2 is pretty good, and I highly recommend watching both Part 1 and 2. Overhaul, the Green Hornet series, aired in 1966 and was cancelled in 1967. Overall, this series has become a cult classic, and it's easy to see why. It's definitely a very unique superhero show in its own right, very unconventional. As a result, the superhero is not portrayed as being one of the good guys, but is more as a person who pretends to be one of the bad guys and plays into it. It has a fantastic superhero card, the Black Beauty. So fantastical and so elegant, it almost rivals the Batmobile. And of course, the series is also famous for Bruce Lee's breakout role, and arguably, when you think of Kato, it's Bruce Lee's performance that comes to mind, and it's heavily influenced the character since then. Overall, this is a pretty good, solid series, but why did it not have a second season? Well, there's a lot of factors, and the obvious is the ratings. Critically reception, people loved it, but it was the ratings that ultimately doomed the show. And so why were the ratings low? Well, I might have a few theories. One is, I think it's kind of Kato, as it was clear that many people were tuning in because they loved Kato. Even Van Williams, who played the Green Hornet, used to go to executives and essentially beg for Kato to have more of a role in the stories. And as I've seen from many episodes, Kato doesn't have that big of a role. I think the only time he had a really massive role, or massive speaking role, I should say, was in the Chinatown War episode, where basically he goes up against a rival martial artist, which is a fun and solid episode and one very memorable of the series. Another reason I think the series only lasted for one season, I think it might be the marketing. Because it was marketed by the guys that made Batman, I think people who want to watch the show thought it was going to be exactly like the Batman series, only for it to be complete opposite. But however, that's how it got good critical reception, because it was in complete contrast. So who knows? Who knows if that one played a factor. Another thing I think I have had gripes with the series was that the car chases were too long and sometimes not that eventful or that fun. And another one, the Rogues Gallery. Again, I said at the beginning of the series, the Green Hornet mostly battled a variety of gangsters, but even then, the villains were usually one-shots, and rarely did these villains come back, which is a shame, because some villains were actually genuinely good and I would have loved to see come back. The Firebug, the Scarf, the phony Green Hornet, Dr. Mabuse, the influential eccentric hunters, and even a few gangsters that have made their presence in the series would have loved to come back to simply start up another racket. Overall, I think these factors played into, one, why the series probably didn't get a second season, but surprisingly, I don't mind it lasted for a season. I thought it's a pretty good, solid, solid series. And the episodes are, what I like about it, you can watch them out of order, except for the two-parters, and you wouldn't miss really much of anything. Overall, this series had so much potential. If I was in charge of it back then and was given a second series, I would introduce more memorable villains, improve the car chases, give Kato more of a story to do, and take more risks. Already, the Green Hornet series was taking risks because mostly this was not a traditional superhero. So I felt that second season, if I was in charge, I'd give it more risks. Overall, despite it only lasting one season, this is still a phenomenal TV show and one of the most underrated superhero series of all time. And I'm really glad it's getting more of a cult following, and many people are tuning in to the Green Hornet's explosives, heroic, and basically action-packed adventures. The series should also be famous for really being the launching pad career of Bruce Lee. After the series, Bruce Lee went to do martial art films. I believe that mostly occurred in the 70s. Unfortunately, he did die in his sleep on in his chair whilst on set of a film, from what I managed to find out. And unfortunately, his son Brandon Lee, who too later go on to play a superhero, the Crow, unfortunately died on set. So both father and son are famous for playing superheroes, and each are very iconic and synonymous with their respected superheroes. Though they're really not that well known to huge mainstream massive. They are kind of like, I say superheroes in the middle. They're not like what we're seeing constantly, but they're like in the middle, and they definitely have had their influences and impacts. Van Williams, on the other hand, after the series, I think he did a few more acting roles before quitting, and lived a quiet and decent life until I believe he passed in 2016, I believe. Overall, these two act, and he's always looked fond of finding out more and more fans are tuning in to the Green Hornet's adventures. And I think he took pride in the fact that he created a superhero show that finally was getting an audience. And deservedly so. And there we have it. That was the Green Hornet 66 episode review of Invasion in Space Part 2. This was the final episode of the Green Hornet series. You already heard my summary of the series. You heard my summary of the plot. And it's a real shame that this is another series come to an end. But I'm kind of glad it did, because this was a series I really kind of at some point put off doing. I had invigoration at the beginning of doing it, then it kind of slowed down. But I'm really glad to finally put the series to bed and, give it a heartwell salute, because this is a great series. I do plan to review the Seth Rogen Green Hornet film, as I do want to see, as it is not a continuation of the series, but it is the next media of the Green Hornet, and I want to revisit it to see, how I personally feel about it years later. Overall, for the last time, this was the Green Hornet 66 episode reviews, and until in the next superhero series I plan to do, ladies and gentlemen, so long for now, and have an awesome day.